Hi everyone! Sorry it's been a while since the last time that we talked. It is quite the busy season now that we've hit spring here at Irvine. We have a bunch of programs going on, but I have finally had time to catch up a little bit, and here is our next Trout Thursday, which is all about trout art. Trout art, you may ask? Well, of course you can do art with just about anything, and I don't mean us having the fish paint. However, we are going to talk about fish prints, that do use fish. We're going to talk about all sorts of things that you can do kind of to use art in some way to show how cool fish are or how cool the environment is. It's not just all science. It's not just data collection and taking care of the fish. You can show off your creative side. Maybe you're great at painting, maybe you're good at taking photographs, taking video, making cool little crafts. There's so many things that you can do using art to show your passion for fish. So to start things off, we're going to watch Mr. Jim Tingy do a fish painting and kind of talk about how he got started in watercolor and coloring all these different fish as kind of trophy fish. So instead of doing a taxidermy method, he would actually paint the fish that people would catch so that they could remember their fish for forever, essentially. And so he's going to give us some tips and tricks for watercoloring. If you've never tried watercolor painting, I definitely highly recommend it. So does he. It can be a lot of fun, and it's relatively easy once you kind of get the hang of it. And the great thing about art is that there's no right or wrong answer. Art is very just whatever you feel, and you kind of show that then on a piece of paper. So just because yours might look different than another person's doesn't mean it's not as good. It just means that you have a different kind of idea in your mind, and that's how it translates onto the paper. So here we go with Mr. Jim.
Hi, my name is Jim Tingy, and I am here today with Jenna to show you a little bit about watercolors. I have been painting watercolors since I was your age, or maybe a little older. I learned by myself. I never had art lessons, and I just figured this stuff out. But the one medium, watercolor, was the hardest that I tried. Oils were easy, everything else was easy, but watercolors were hard because you really couldn't make a mistake. If you do it right, you have to go to the very end before you know if you got a painting or not. If you make one blob or you do something stupid and the painting's ruined, you can't fix it. In most cases you can't fix it, but that's why I like it, because I think through the painting. I do a lot of thinking up here and drawing. I'm a doodler, and that's what I was in school. Doodled all the time. Just sat there in the back of the class drawing things. I got busted a few times. Spent some time in the principal's office, but I like to draw. So drawing is sort of the key for me to a watercolor. I have to think about it, and I almost draw it totally in my head. Sounds silly, but I do. And then I paint it in my head. Once I've got it drawn in my head, then it's easy. I just put the watercolor on. And if I just sit down and say, okay, like today, paint this or paint something, it doesn't come to me. But if I have thought about it a lot, then it comes to me. I'm excited about it. Sometimes I'll have 5 paintings at a time going on my art table and moving them around. And one of the things about watercolors is so fun is once you start doing it, then you have to stop, and you want to see what's happened to the water in the watercolor because it moves. And so you got to let it dry, and then I pick it up and I put it in different places in my room, my studio, so that I could look at it and say, oh, this is good from 20 feet away. It's not good when you go right up to it. Most paintings were not done by artists to have people come right up to them and look at them that close. So, give it proper space in a museum or something like that. They usually are the way you saw it in your mind, the way you wanted to do it. I have been painting continuously since I was about 8 or 10, and maybe even younger, and I have paintings all over the world. And what's fun is I get together with some people, haven't seen them for a long time, go over to their house, and there's one of my paintings on the wall. And it's like, oh, I did that. Yeah, that was when I was good. But it's nice to leave something behind, and they're very simple. There's not a lot of money invested. You know, I get most of my equipment here. I get it at you know, just a hobby store or even Target or someplace like that. It's I don't paint with real fancy. There's watercolor tubes, and you can go crazy buying expensive gear, but I don't. And I use what I can on brushes. I probably own hundreds and hundreds of them, but I only use one. I don't know why, and I can't find it right now. So I'm gonna do the best I can. But you kind of get attached to it. And the one I have that I can't find, I've got another studio in Wisconsin, and it's got a tip on it that kind of goes like that. So the tip, this is your tip of a watercolor brush. And if you wet it a little bit, here's the tip. If you wet it, you can kind of get it down like that. That's probably what you want for anything, something in that order. But my really good brush has a bend to it. And it goes up at a weird angle. And so I have to remember that when I'm painting, is that when I put the paint down, I gotta have my fingers just in the right spot to move it. So I do a lot of twisting when I put the paint on, and I'll do that shortly here. You'll see how I'm gonna be pushing the water with the brush, and now you're gonna see me twisting it to move it. And then that's it. I walk away, let it dry, come back and paint it again. Paint over it. I paint watercolors like I paint oils, and that's layering, doing something and walking away from it and coming back and doing some more. And it's worked well for me. I don't go to watercolor people and tell them, you have to do it this way, you have to do it that way. But once I show them all my little tricks, they go, wow, I never thought about that. So anyway, we're gonna do some watercolors here. And this is for Trout in the Classroom, one of the ones I did, got my name on it there. Did that for 2011, actually for one of my good friends, Chuck Dinkle. And then Chuck turned it into it. I didn't do this, he did. He turned the fish, and there's my name right there. So this was on a thing the other day, and my good friend Tom Giannassini called me up and he said, hey, you got to get advertising rights. I said, yeah, I know the t-shirt was on TV, but you can have it digitized. You guys know what that's about, and you can move it. And so I've moved it onto numerous different products, including t-shirts and stuff like that. But I can send it by email. I can finish a project for somebody and have them look at it, and then say if you like it, and then if I want to change something, I can do that. You can make changes with watercolors, but you can't just kind of like, oh, I wanted 3 wings on that bird. Huh? You can't do that. So anyway, let's get going here. This is some of just there's just going to be little tips and techniques and stuff. I'm going to get out a piece of paper right here that's got a drawing on it, and I do this for schools and stuff. I got these already drawn and then copied. It's a little dark, but the kids can take this without having to draw a rainbow trout or a coho, and it's stiff paper. I think it's 20 pounds. They can put that down on their board and tape it, and they've got something to paint. So I usually bring a lot of pictures, so they're looking at the pictures of whatever it is that is on that piece of paper. Boy, this is stuck down there. It's been on there a while. That 2 is fine. Okay, so what I'm going to use is this shape to put on the watercolor to paint a rainbow trout that may or may not look like that one over there. I don't know. We'll do the best we can here. I was going to show one. Well, I don't have the rainbow folder, but this is my brown trout folder, and I make a folder for every fish I'm doing, and this happens to be different pictures of brown trout, and then I keep them in here, and then I like to include ones that I caught. So I caught that fish, I caught that fish, and I can remember that fish, and so when I'm painting it, I have a pretty good idea. And this is my color palette, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute, but as I'm painting it, this is one of my techniques. I don't use a plastic thing where you mix the paint up, and then I use a piece of regular watercolor paper, and so this doesn't look like a brown trout, but it kind of does when you see that mine is very colorful. My fish are very, very colorful. The brown trout is one of the most colorful fish in the world. So some of this color went into that little brown trout right there. Anyway, so I like to keep a folder and I'll update it. And then the other thing I do is I draw on copy paper. I don't draw on watercolor paper. And the reason I don't is that if I draw on watercolor paper and I make a mistake, and then I go to erase it with a good eraser, it still leaves a little scuzz on the paper. And it's never right. So I got tired of that when I was a young kid, and I started painting on copy paper like this. And if I wanted to make the fish bigger, I just blew it up. And if I wanted to change something on it for another fish, well, this one is actually two fish, this is how I can change shape, and I can change the dimension, and I can do it without having to redraw the whole fish. But once you draw something and you like your drawing, then you can use it time and time again. This is, I first started painting the brown trout in 2008. So I've kept this in here, and I think I've not painted it about 10 times using my materials. Then I'll put this back in here, put this back in brown trout, put my color palette back in, stick it into my folder, and I'm done. And I can also come out of the house, and if I haven't finished something up, these are some of my color palettes. Over the years, it doesn't say what fish it is, but sometimes I'll put the name of the fish in. I practice in here. And this is what I use. This is probably a bigger painting. I used a little bit bigger piece of paper to see what I was going to do, how I was going to make things flow, how I was going to combine colors. What happens if I put this together with that? Oh, I don't like that. So this is mixing your colors on a piece of watercolor paper, and then what's kind of cool, these are, I don't know how many years old, but I should be able to put a little water on that. Well, it got a little dark in there because it had some black. That'll kind of do it, but a lot of times I can recreate the color without having to go and start over again. Now you can see the orange starting to come in there. So if I just needed a little bit more color, I can do that. Sometimes I'll go to a painting and start right from the painting instead of trying to make the colors. I'll say, well, I've got all the colors I wanted right in the painting. If you go into a very fancy museum, there's a beautiful watercolor on the wall, and you snuck in and you could actually get the watercolor that that artist was using 100 years ago. I like to do this. And so these go into my files, and I put those over here by my water. And my little trick is simply go from water, dip the tip. See how I just did that? The water isn't all the way up here. If there were, then you get one of those little bubbles that roll down the edge of it, and eventually this will drop onto your painting and it could ruin it. So I'm always got a rag in my pocket, and I'm always cleaning this, not the tip, but I will dip the tip. And that's the biggest thing I can tell you today, is dip the tip. You don't go in like that. You get plenty of water just by dipping the tip. And then you come over to your color palette, or come over to your color, and that's where you mix up your color. And you go from the color, not to the painting. You go from the color to a piece of paper. And you go, oh, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted. Or, nope, that isn't even close. So I'm just going to, this is a makeup fish, so I could just be put, if I wanted some orange on the tips or in this part of the fin, I can just put it on just like that. And all I did was I just dipped the tip, pull it over. Now when I want to go change to a different color, I wash it real good, wipe it off, wash it again, wipe it off, and now I have a very clean brush. And I have done many, many, many pieces of art that are this big. They're hanging in various places. And big restaurants and stuff. I've got some of my watercolors. They're huge. And I did them all with that little brush. You can move a lot of color easily with a small brush. You don't need a big fat brush to move color. Alright, so we clean the brush. I use one color at a time. I usually start with light colors and then go to dark. So I think many artists do that too. You put your light colors on first, and then you keep adding your darker colors. And the last color you want to put on is the blacks. Because man, they hammer a lot of your color. They'll make your color disappear. See right in here. Alright, we're putting some black on, and that blue is gone. And once it's gone, it's gone. You can't get back in there and get the blue out. So you have to be careful. If you go light to dark, and the very last color you're putting on is dark. As your blacks and your browns, you mix the colors that you want. So this is a dark color. Some of these, this might be, I don't know if it is or not. I think it is. I didn't bring them today, but I have acrylics, and they come in tubes, and I just put a dot of that on something, and then I mix the acrylic like that, same thing, and then I paint with acrylics, and they work just like watercolors. I like to leave white, and it took me years and years to figure this out, but most beginning artists want to cover their whole paper, or their art paper, whatever, their canvas. They want to cover it with paint, corner to corner. And I learned over the years to leave white, leave a lot of white, and then your eye comes into the painting, everything kind of lightens up a little bit. One of my acrylic brushes, and I'm going to use this Frisket, and what it is, like liquid rubber, and I can put this anywhere I want on the trout, where when I'm done, I just erase it off with my finger, and I'll have white coming out. So it's really good for eyeballs and stuff like that. Or just a little bit of variation of the fish. You just put this stuff on first. Sometimes I'll spend hours doing this before I even start to put on the color, because I want to get the white in there first. That's really important. And then I can wash this out in regular water, and it's good. Those are kind of blocky on it, but you'll see what it looks like when it dries. And after I put the color over it. You're messing your place. So, leave white till last is very important. I push the water around, I don't know if you're watching, but when I come at an angle, and usually about just a comfortable angle like this, and now all I'm doing is pushing the water, I'm actually picking up some of the color from that tail, that fin, kind of smoothing it out, and using that water instead of coming back to my palette. Or if I want, I can go back to the palette, pick up a little bit of that, and add that in there. I do a lot of shaking of the brush too. I move it a lot, just moving along, just kind of shaking it. So that's a trick too. Push the water, push it wherever you want on the page, and use an angle so you're not pressing it down like this. But I'm going to show you this, which is really cool. This is a trick I learned from a kid in Cincinnati at an art deal. I was teaching classes, and what the kid did, I wanted to put dots on the fish. Most rainbows have a lot of dots on them. You see those? Well, you could sit there and make a point on your brush, and you could go all along there and get dots on your fish when you're just about done with it. Or you could take a little bit of this, mix up some black, and maybe thick. My black is almost gone. I use it so much. It's still not very dark, is it? This is where acrylic would be really good, because it's pretty thick stuff. But I just show you the technique, and you can try it on your own. Alright, so what this, I was watching this student paint, and I heard tap, 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 tap. What are you doing? And what she had done, she had turned the brush around, and she put her end point into the paint, and then she was putting her dots on her rainbow trout. Isn't that cool? I mean, that's like, wow, what you learn from kids is amazing. So, if you ever decide to use that, the end of the paintbrush works just as well as the brushes. It's actually a little harder to make those little teeny dots with a brush. Real easy to use the end of your paintbrush. I'm always looking across the colors and trying to determine which color I'm going to go to next and when I want to do it. And so I usually paint one color, do the whole fish in that color, or parts of the fish in that color, and then come to the next color and do the same thing until I do it in layers, so that I do it more like, now I'm going to do all the yellows. For example, I could take this, my yellow one. I can tell right now that it looks a little dirty. Can you see that? It looks kind of dirty in there, doesn't it? Yep, it's got a lot of green in it. So what I'll do is I'll wipe that out. If that doesn't work, I'll go to another yellow. Try this one here. That's pretty bright. That looks almost greenish, doesn't it? Ah, we'll go with this. So now what I want, if I wanted to put the yellow on, I'm going to put the yellow right where I want it, push it, added it to the fin, and it just blends in. There we go. Or I could just make big sweeps across the whole fish if I wanted to do that. Spread the color. So that's putting on the yellow. Maybe yellow down here, down the jaw. Around here. So this is how I'm adding color. I'm pushing the color, I'm mixing it up before, and then I come into my palette and I go from there. If I need more color, I don't go right to here, I go to there. I go to what I've made over there. In this case, I need to move some of that over there. So I've got a nice yellow working for me, and got another little gray in it, kind of like that. And then you'll see me wiping the tip a lot. I do that to keep the tip a tip, and that's my tip. Twist the tip sometimes just with your hand, rotate it, it'll keep it nice and sharp. And I'm not going to finish this rainbow trout today. Well, one of the things I like to tell people, young artists, is whatever you paint, share it with others. Don't be afraid to give something away. Don't be afraid to take your painting and hand it to somebody if they like it. And I learned that from a young artist in California many years ago. And she would watch me paint, and then she would say, "Can you do better than that?" And I go, "Yeah." And she says, "Why are you keeping that?" What do you mean? Why keep it if you can do better? Tough question. So I kept a folder, and that was what I would empty when I was with other people. And, oh, Jim, I really like this. And I said, go ahead, take it. So a lot of my artwork has just ended up being given away, and I feel good about it. If they like it, and I can share it with them, and if they take it home, it ends up in the strangest places. I'm always proud of it. I look back, I remember when I painted that. So don't be afraid to give your work away. I went to Europe, spent a whole summer just painting, and I do one painting every day. You know, pretty good painting, about that size, and one book. And usually a complicated scene, it would take me an hour and a half to paint the whole thing. And then I would back up all my art, let the watercolor dry, which is good because they're not like oils, they take a long time to dry. And back up the car and we'd go on to the next place. And when I got home from Europe, my friends all wanted to know how the trip went. You know, what did we see? All I had to do, I didn't have to take pictures and photographs and digital and, you know, put them on an app or something, Facebook. I just took my book out and went through the book and said, well, this is when I was here, this is when I was in Marseille, this is when I was, and they would look at it and they would see these watercolors and they go, wow, that's really nice. Can I have that? And I go, sure, take it. So I rip it right out of my book, hand them the watercolor. And I said, what do we owe you? And I nothing, just take it, as long as you enjoy it. So I emptied that. I have 2 or 3 left I gave to my parents. But I don't miss them. And every once in a while, I'll be at someone's house and they'll drag me into a corner and they'll say, hey, remember this? And I say, yeah, I do. And I usually put my information on it, where it was, the date, and sign my name to it. Sign your name, sign your name, sign your name. I just think it's important because I find artwork here and there that doesn't have a signature on it. And I would sure like to know who painted it. And I don't know if they're afraid to put it on or they just don't want to take the time. But so share your work, and by all means share it with young people, and share it with somebody who gets enthusiastic about what you do. You'll be doing different things than me, and it's a really nice game.
Thank you, Mr. Jim, for showing us all those tips and tricks for watercolor painting. I hope you guys take a chance to try it yourself. Maybe you don't want to paint a fish, maybe you want to paint a macroinvertebrate or another animal that would be in a wetland ecosystem. The choice is yours, the power is yours to use your newfound skill and just practice. Even just taking the paintbrush and putting some sort of paint on a piece of paper. It doesn't matter what it is, it doesn't have to be anything. You saw all of his little palettes. I thought that was beautiful art, and that's just his palette. So there's so many options out there for you. So this is just part 1 of our trout art saga. We will have part 2 up shortly, so be sure to check that out for all sorts of other types of fish art.